Now, before going ahead and doing this job, please consider that this can be a relatively complex job for most of the people out there, and it's very easy to do a mistake which can ruin your engine or make you lose more money than it can save you. So in order to prevent that, make sure that you buy at the very least all the gaskets and accessories listed on the screen right now. These are required to do this job. Also, if you want to really invest in your engine, then you might consider replacing these parts as well. It's not absolutely necessary to buy the last ones, but that's how you do a full rebuild when it comes to a head gasket replacement. Okay, so another thing to consider is to organize very well all the bolts and parts you remove. If possible, mark everything and take picture of your work. Also consider that this can take you more than 20 hours of full-time work. And finally, make sure that you've got all the tools you need, including a good precise torque wrench, a chain breaker, impact gun for the crankshaft bolt, and so on. Alright, so with that being said, let's go straight into the action. I'm going to break the timing chain. Okay, so here it comes, the pin is out. Now, as I said in a previous video, make sure that you mark exactly the position of the exhaust camshaft and the intake camshaft. They have to be synchronized with the crankshaft. That's why it's important, for example, to make a mark over here where these two rotors will connect. Also, it's a good idea to take some pictures of the position of both of the camshafts. So what I'm gonna do, I will scratch a little bit on the back here. Okay, so let's see if I can show you the mark I made. So that one will go in between those two. That's how I mark it, and that's how I know where to put it back. Also, I will know exactly from where I remove the pin from the chain, so that's how I can mark it. As you can see, the tension can be applied from this side, which is perfect. On the other side, the chain is tensioned, and this is what you want to see. Next, I'm going to open these bolts from the camshaft holders, just a little bit at a time, not all the way, just like that, because you want to avoid letting the tension only on one bolt. And the camshafts should come out. Now what's left here is this bracket, which holds as well the hydraulic lifters for each valve. And again, when you remove these, make sure that you install them back in the same position. Now I can finally remove this bolt from here. And next we've got 10 engine head bolts, which holds the engine head on the engine block. To open them, you're gonna need the E18. So let's get started. I'm going to open them from the middle and make my way to the exterior. So let's see, I'm gonna use a breaker bar. Oh, that's crazy, man. They are very tight. I actually believe these are way over 150 foot-pounds of torque. So that's a lot of force. So here is how I organized the camshaft holders, the hydraulic lifters and the bracket, all of them from cylinder 1 to cylinder 4. Next, it's time to remove this special AGR hose from the engine head. Use a T40. And let's continue removing the head bolts. Now, as I said at the beginning, it's a good idea to replace these bolts because they are stretched and you can reuse them, but they are going to be a little bit longer than they should. And finally, guys, the engine head should come out. I'm going to detach the automatic transmission fluid dipstick. Okay, now finally we can remove the head gasket. You can also inspect the head gasket for cracks and begin to diagnose what's the reason you have to replace the head gasket from the first place. Because if, for example, there is no crack in here and you find coolant inside the oil, for example, then the problem might be somewhere else, not on the gasket. So a proper testing before doing this replacement is also required. Some people replace the head gasket just as a preventive maintenance, and that's fine as well. So here it comes. Now from this point, as I said in the previous video, you can replace the chain guides. This one, for example, which will get the tensioner on, you just have to pull it. Here it comes. Now if you have a closer look, the chain guide looks very good. It's not worn up. There are no scratches or anything. It's very solid. So it's completely reusable. However, if you get to this point and you invest a lot of money, you gotta go all the way and replace as well the chain guides. And the most common failure point is this connection here, where it sits on that pin. You have to have a closer look and inspect it for cracks. And if you see any cracks, you have to replace this, otherwise you've done this job for nothing. Also, if you use this strategy of holding the chain on the crankshaft, make sure that it didn't jump any tooth and it sits very close and tight on the crankshaft. So going back to diagnosing, as I said, if you find a crack in the head gasket, then you can consider yourself lucky, because it's going to be an easy diagnose. You find the problem. Most likely, if you replace the gasket and install it back properly, your engine is going to run fine. However, if you replace the head gasket because the engine was overheating, as you can see, the engine block is made of iron, very solid and sturdy. But if you have a look on the engine head, this one is made of aluminum and it's going to bend a lot easier. So you need to check the surface, which has to be perfectly flat in order to seal completely on the head gasket. So the next step is to check how flat is the surface which contacts with the head gasket and with the engine block. And while you turn it upside down, expect some oil and coolant to come out, so be prepared with some paper or anything you have. Now let's give it a very nice clean. Okay, so after you clean it up, it's time to check how straight is the surface. For that, use something that you know for sure that is straight. You can check it out like that. You watch the line and it has to be straight. It's easy to spot if it's not, so then you place it on the engine head. You can take a file, like for example the 0.13 millimeters. I'm gonna place my straight line and check. Obviously the valves are gonna be a little bit above, so you don't need to worry about that. For example here, this file should not be able to pass. Alright, now you can downsize and do the real test. You've got 0.08 millimeters. This obviously should not pass either, and if it slightly do that, then you might have to take the head to the machine. So you can see it doesn't go under. Now you gotta do the same on the engine block. Give it a nice clean like that, and make sure while you clean the surface that you cover all these holes with some aluminum foil or paper, because you don't want the dirt going inside the channels for the oil and coolant. Actually, the best thing to do after you've done the job is to change the oil and the coolant a lot earlier, like after 500 kilometers. So in that way you can guarantee and also check if the job was done correctly, obviously, because if you see again a lot of oil and coolant mix, then you've got a problem. So now while the engine head is off, another test you can do is to check the valve seal. You do that by simply pouring some oil or gasoline or any type of fluid except of water You put it into these channels and see if the valve leaks the fluid. You can see I let the oil overnight and this valve right here is leaking. If, for example, I'm going to pour some gasoline in here, eventually the gasoline will come out. Now if you want to go further and inspect the valve seat, clean it up or resurface it, so you're gonna need this guy right here. Okay. Then on the valve spring you find the right adapter which will fit on top like that. Yeah, just tight it in. Make sure that the other end will press on the valve, so you won't just push the valve on. You need to compress only the spring. Now with a magnet, you just take out the retainers. You can see one is out. Let's see, second one is out as well. Now it's time to release the tension. You can actually see right now on the other side, all the fluid came out. So that's how you know that the seal is okay. Now the valve can be pushed out. Here is the spring, the valve, and the top which sits on the spring like that. Now if you have a closer look inside, you can see a lot of gunk in there and carbon buildup. This is going to prevent the valve to seal. So you want all this carbon free. You can do that through different methods. If you have, for example, you can take it, for example, to someone who has a sandblasting machine or something like that, which will make it like new. So from this point depends of what kind of access you have to the tools, or you can just do it manually, but it will take a lot longer. You just have to make sure that you install the valve in the same position. Do not switch the valves even though they look identical. Now it's time to prepare the engine for the installation of the head gasket. Let's start with the engine block. Here obviously give it a perfect clean and make sure that all these threads for the bolts are completely clean and oil free, because you want to torque them accurately as possible. So take some sort of little sticks with some cotton and clean it very well until you get no oil on the tip of your cotton. And it will be a lot more efficient if you soak it in gasoline or some brake cleaner if you have. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but those threads are a lot cleaner than these ones. Make sure that you clean very well the piston head and do not leave any carbon buildup. This engine looks quite good actually. There is no carbon buildup on the pistons, which is quite impressive for such an old engine. This car has 300,000 kilometers. It's not that much, but it's not so little either, so it's quite decent. And I suspect that once you replace this head gasket, this car will go for another 300,000 easy without any problems. Okay, so now it's time to put the head gasket on. So you have to catch the chain tensioners with the head gasket. Now the head is placed back and the chain guides are going to be always in the way. So if, for example, you replace the chain and you remove the old one, make sure that the chain guide sits as close as possible to each other, because they will always be in the way. As I said, it's a good idea to replace the bolts, use new ones, and if you want to reuse the old ones, then clean very well the threads and inspect the threads. They should be in good condition. Also clean them from oil and debris and stuff like that. Also it's important that the head is clean and free of oil. Now before installing the head bolts, we gotta put first the cover, remember. So we have to take the chain up at this point. So we have to keep the chain up if you reuse the old one, or even if you install the new one. Right now is the time to put the new one on and keep it like that. Now I'm going to lift a little bit the engine head and the cover should slide in. Down here you've got the gasket for the camshaft pulley and for the coolant. Make sure that you replace these. Okay, so now it's time to install the head bolts. Now just take your impact gun and tighten them very well and you're gonna be done. Nah, I'm just kidding, guys. All the bolts are numbered, so you've got bolt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is the sequence you're gonna tighten them, and first you gotta just make them snug. Now the first step is to torque them down to 10 foot-pounds, all of them, these big ones. So let's start from bolt 1. Now with the E12, we gotta torque these two bolts to 10 foot-pounds as well. Step 3, tighten the big bolts to 44 foot-pounds. Then these two to 15 foot-pounds. Finally, you gotta tighten the big bolts on 90 degrees, again in sequence. Then you gotta tighten them one more time to 90 degrees in sequence. So in total it's basically 180 degrees, but you want to do that 2 times because you want to apply that pressure even on the head gasket. Okay, so we are finally done with installing the head. Now it's time to put the rocker arm bracket on. If everything is dry and there is no oil, make sure that you lubricate a little bit these rocker arms or hydraulic pushers. So when you start the engine for first time, they will not run dry. That's important. And finally, it's time to put the camshafts. It's hard to see on camera, but the scratches match perfectly. Okay. Now I don't know if you can see anything in there, but if you have a closer look, you can see that they are perfectly aligned. The scratches match. And we've got as well the mark here where I broke the chain. So let's put the chain back. Okay, so now the chain is almost on. Next, tighten the camshaft holders to 60 Newton meters. Now after everything is torqued down and the chain is in position, just place the cover on so you can avoid dirt going in there. And from this point you can put the crankshaft pulley so we can begin to turn the engine. Okay, it will go in the same position. Now you can see on the crankshaft pulley there is a mark that will match with the shaft itself, and that's how you know the position of it. Okay, now it's time to torque it down, which is gonna be challenging, so let's use the 27mm. And I forgot to mention, before you install the crankshaft, make sure that you tighten the bolts around the crankshaft. So you gotta be tightened to 147 foot-pounds. Alright, you gotta turn it 45 degrees more, which is gonna be from this position to a vertical position. It's a lot easier if there are two persons. One can hold very well the crankshaft and one can turn. Okay guys, so from this point there are a lot of parts to install back, and for each one of these parts I've got separate videos about them. And in order to keep this video short, I'm going to finish this job without filming it. So if you have any questions, let them in the comments below. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to this channel, subscribe as well. It will motivate me to make a lot more videos for you guys in the future. Hopefully a lot more useful and quality videos. That takes a lot of energy, time and resources. So stay tuned and I will see you soon.